my area of interest as the internet grew. Later, I met the former CTO of Chevron, and we wrote a grant together, which we won, a $121 million grant, which was funded by the Department of Energy to do a smart grid demonstration project. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the smart grid because it sort of intersects with some of the things that you do. So that's how I got started working around infrastructure, and I became the managing director of the USC Energy Institute. And I'm on the board now of Infrastructure Masons. So I teach a course on sustainable infrastructure at USC. I've taught that for a number of years now. So I work with kids that are engineers of the future around power, around digital technologies and all these things. So that's kind of how I came to this space and got to know everyone in the infrastructure industry. Is you know, I see it that as we have more and more smart systems, be it energy, be it vehicles, be it smart homes, whatever it is, that the social and behavioral are coming closer and closer to the digital infrastructure and the energy infrastructure and water and how all these things sort of intersect. So that's what we're going to take a look at today. In my book and over the last few years, I've looked at that intersection of behavior and technology, and I'm sure all of you have seen the double helix of DNA, but I use that as a way, as sort of an analytical framework to think about how we look at behavior and technology and that intersection where behavior shapes technology and technology shapes behavior. And from that emanates all these new values, behaviors, and the kinds of things that we'll be talking about today. And that these two, behavior and technology intertwined, shape our world today and our world going forward in the future. And that's where you guys come in. I mean, this intersection now, you know, you talk to teens, for example, they say they're on their phones online constantly. You know, it's part of the fabric of everyday life now. So, you know, that connects, of course, to all the things that you do. So we'll take a look and think about what this means today. And I've spent some time thinking about this vis-a-vis our current situation with COVID. And I talked about how people are coming untethered. And what I meant by that was this idea that young people in particular, digital natives, those that grew up in a world there always was an internet, have unhooked from many traditional behaviors of prior generations. I'm talking about things like getting married, buying a home, going to church, joining a political party, going to the Rotary Club or golf club, all these sorts of things that people might have done sort of routinely. Young people are unhooking en masse from these things, and at the same time are hyper attached to digital technologies. So that's the notion of coming untethered that I've been exploring for the last few years and explored in my book. And what's happened now is the book came out, by the way, this last year. And since then, all the themes that I looked at have amplified like you wouldn't believe under COVID. So rather than being simply something that digital natives are doing, now everyone is suddenly forced to live untethered. So COVID has served as a forcing function toward this untethered society or untethered world, which is really, really interesting. Now, since COVID, as you know, certainly in the United States, we've seen a lot of social unrest around racial injustice and things like that, which further complicates our scenario that we're enacting in. So I wanted to bring this to you in addition to COVID. This is my friend Jeremiah Ouyang, who's an analyst. And he talks about recently the crisis cake. And it's this idea that we have, as you see at the bottom, the pandemic and climate problems. But as you go up this cake now, things like the recession and economic issues, inequality and racism, civil unrest, political uncertainty, automation fears, and then this sort of fake news and fake information that's out there around all these things, around climate, around what's happening with COVID, for example. So this crisis cake is sort of where we find ourselves now. So it complexifies living untethered under COVID in this very unusual, strange situation we find ourselves in. And now some of these other pressures on us, on our customers, for yourselves, you know, our families and our communities, our society. So this kind of gives you a sense of how to think about those changes that are going on. So what I do and what I'm going to do for you today is, I like to say I see the constellations in the stars. There's a lot of information out there. There's coming at you from all directions. There's studies coming out from a variety of fields about the changes going on in society or where people are at. And I like to synthesize across fields and really pull out what are we seeing in terms of sort of the overarching trends. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about some of the trends going forward that are starting, that may have started prior to this moment, but that are certainly intensified by COVID, intensified by this crisis cake moment, and what I see as sort of long-term trends that you can sort of think about where you're going to be navigating your businesses going forward. So there's going to be 5 main trends I'm going to outline today, just to sort of hit the main ones hard so it really gives you a sense. And as I go through these, think what you might have seen, think what you might be experiencing, or your customers or your families, your employees at this point in time. So the first major trend here is a flight from the cities. I think one of the things we've learned in COVID, and now amplified with, you know, certainly in the US, the civil unrest happening, is that the cities are a tough place to be. So yeah, density is not your friend in a pandemic, we find out. So, you know, look to New York and places like that to think about the impact of COVID, certainly, and these other issues happening. So you're going to see a flight from the cities, from San Francisco, from New York, probably Chicago, Minneapolis, LA, all these cities that have been hit by COVID and that have been involved in a lot of civil unrest. You're going to see people fleeing cities and going to suburban and sometimes even rural settings. There was a study done of searches on a Move, sort of a home finder platform. Of the 1,200 searches that they looked at, 90% were outbound from San Francisco, 90%. Only 10% of people were trying to move into San Francisco. In New York City, there was a poll that said 15% of those that have already left are not planning to return. So if you're looking at numbers like 15%, and even if that's 10%, then the scale of that will have significant impacts on the cities. And on business and commerce in the cities. So this is something to think about when you think about things like connectivity. Now in COVID, you know, we're trying to connect, and especially when you have young digital natives, we have a very large cohort of millennials, for example. Connectivity is key. So what does that mean for you guys when you talk about a flight to the suburbs or to rural settings where we want connectivity? And that's something to really consider. The second is work from home. I talk in my book about the untethered workforce. Now we're all working untethered. Many people are not going into the office at all. And this started out as, again, a sort of digital native centric trend that I explored in this chapter about the untethered workforce. This is van life. Some of you might have seen that. If you go on Pinterest, if you go on Instagram and look up hashtag van life, you're going to see a whole bunch of these. And what they are they're custom built vans where people are living in these things and they live this adventurous life. Hey, I can be at the beach one day and at the mountains the next day. Well, if you've got this work from home and you've got this social distancing thing where you don't want to be in dense environments, this idea of van life is sort of bring your own environment. Yeah, so we're going to see a lot more of that, this RV thing, this van thing, where you can sort of, if we need to come into the city and you're sort of bring your environment, your contained environment with you. So it's something to think about. Do we need to sort of have some kind of setups for these vans, you know, showers or, you know, Wi-Fi and parking lot kind of thing. So the second work from home, and some of you might have experienced this, the challenge is other people. You know, somebody said hell is other people. Hell is other people when you're working from home, particularly when you've got children or dogs or things. So recently, just this week, a study or an announcement came out, let's say, out of Brooklyn, Park Slope, Brooklyn, New York, and it shocked the parents. And what the principals said at the local school, at the local elementary school, they said, hey, because of distancing and COVID, we can't have all the kids here. So we're going to do it in waves. So your kid's going to come in for a little bit and then it's going to go home. So the kid is going to be at home for 2 weeks a month. So suddenly these parents are going, whoa, wait a minute, who kind of count on the school in a sense for childcare. And, you know, when you're working, now you have the kids at home because of COVID. So this idea of work from home is going to be complexified because of COVID. And here's the other thing to think about. Work from home became this trend again, as I said, about millennials. But now, let's say older folks, everybody's gotten a taste of it now. So at the point in time when they say, okay, come back to the office, a lot of places are saying, like Twitter and others are just saying, hey, we're all in on work from home now. You know, Google's work from home for the rest of the year. Facebook's going to go all in on work from home. So a lot of these companies are going to do this. So in other words, now that everybody's gotten a taste of it, they're going to sort of want this or some sort of hybrid version of work from home. So this is one of these trends that started out in amplified under COVID and now is going to be something going forward that we're going to see some or more of as a result of our COVID moment. And of course, another challenge for your employees is sort of peace and quiet. You know, if you're doing a podcast and the kids are running around there, the dogs are barking, you know, how do you focus? How do you have that peace and quiet? So, you know, one thing I talked to a developer about is creating environments that are sort of self-contained where you have a podcasting room you can sort of check out and that kind of thing. So these are the new kinds of thinking that we need to think about. The third thing is we're going to see an acceleration in touchless business and automation. Again, this cuts right to the heart of what you guys are doing. It could be anything from touchless business transactions. You know, my brother's doing touchless billing, for example. So if you're working from home, you don't have to be in the office with the printer printing out stuff. It prints it for you and it mails it for you, these bills that are going out to the customers. So any kind of touchless thing like this, which runs on a digital infrastructure. The second thing is this, and this is more subtle, but this is going to, again, be an ongoing trend. Now, you think about the relationships at work, the social network at work. You know, you see the secretary, the receptionist, or these various people, and, you know, over the water cooler, and you have relationships with them. One thing that's challenging about work from home is it creates a distance between these people. And if you don't know them that well, it's a lot easier to lay somebody off, right? So in the interest of cost cutting and managing expenses in this COVID and ongoing environment, there will be an increase in automation, including robotics, but also automation in terms of AI. This is an example of Amelia. I don't know if you've seen this yet, but this is from IPsoft, a company in New York. I've actually been to their offices, met with them, seen what this does. This is the way they're framing it is it's a downloadable employee. So basically this Amelia takes the place of one of your HR people or something like that, your benefits person. And so Amelia learns the whole system and somebody says, hey, I'd like to, you know, apply for some days off or sick leave or something. Amelia says, okay, fill out this form. And you've now replaced an employee with an AI digital downloadable employee. So at this point in time, I talked to one of the fellows about this. I said, are you seeing an uptick? He goes, oh yeah, we have a 300% sudden spike in interest and orders for Amelia during COVID. So automation will be something that gets amplified and sped up under this COVID moment.